Matrix is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of Shorts with Liz Clark. With over 20 years as a dedicated supporter of the fitness industry, we're thrilled to continue a partnership geared towards success for all those who believe in better.
Hello, thank you so much for joining me today for our new podcast series, Shorts with Liz. I am so thrilled to announce this series where we are going to be bringing insights from people both inside and outside of the industry to talk about hot topics that are relevant to us. So today, I'm excited to welcome our former chairman of the board of IHRSA, now HFA, Chris Craytor, and our current chairman of the Health and Fitness Association, Chris Smith. So for those that don't know, Chris Craytor was the chairman when I stepped into this role, and I'm currently with Chris Smith as our chairman today. So we have learned a lot, and it's been an exciting few years with a lot of really amazing things on the horizon to come. And so we are just going to jump right in at it. And I'm going to start with you, Chris Craytor, and talk about, with your time on the board and as our chairman, what are the things that you are probably most proud of your tenure as our chair?
Yeah, I think I'm most proud of how the industry has recovered and really excited to see, it continue to grow. And so to see how the industry has really responded as resilient as ever is really, really awesome. I think it's just a testament to the fact that those rumors of its demise were very much overstated. And then, in terms of being proud, I'm really proud of the work that the board and the IHRSA team have done throughout this time frame. I think it was really cool to watch that group come together, and the quality of the board continues to be very high. We have some of the best minds in the industry collaborating on what comes next. And so even though I'm a casual observer now, it's kind of fun to see what's going to come. And I'm really excited to see what the show is going to look like, the newly branded show is going to look like next year in Vegas.
It's going to look amazing. I'll just tell you that, which is really, really exciting. And it's going to look really different. I'll say that too. So Chris, and then we're going to go to Mr. Smith here in a second though. So to be on the journey and to see where we've gone, but how do you think that you really helped advance what we're doing for the industry today?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest changes during my tenure were around advocacy and how that really needed to be a central pillar of the trade association. When I first joined the board, advocacy was something that a few members really cared about deeply, and it was the same members year after year deciding to fund and participate in that process. Now you have much more of a widespread involvement in advocacy. It's important to certainly more well-known to the broader industry, so it's been democratized. You've also had the creation of the NHFA, so bringing some of those folks who really cared the most about advocacy as a essential function of the trade association could get together and help drive that process forward. And then the final piece would really be, hiring of you, right? Because Liz, I know that was your background, and your location in DC is really critical for us to have a voice in Washington, DC, in the halls of Congress and within the federal government. I think ultimately having a trade association with a presence in our nation's capital is really a requirement. And you've made some really great additions to the team in that region to allow us to be more effective. So I think about change. I think that approach to advocacy is what I'm most proud of, because I think the foundation's been laid for us to continue to be a more relevant trade association in terms of getting things done. And also, if you look at the things like the growth of the PAC, which I know you helped champion, for example, these are things that, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 7 years ago, were not on a radar screen, and they're very much front of mind for the association now.
Thank you, Chris. And as I think probably most people in our industry do know, right, that is my background, and it's been really fun to even see our evolution through an election and where we've landed there, and then now even with our office space. So we will very soon have the Health and Fitness Association headquarters be a block away from the White House, which has been a long journey to get there, but a very intentional part of the process.
Can I put in a quick shameless plug, Liz?
Sure.
And that would be for the fly-in. So for those of you who have not been to a fly-in in DC, there will be another one in May, I believe. That's when they've happened typically. And it's a chance for the industry to come together and storm the nation's the halls of Congress and the nation's capital, and really meet some of our congressional leaders and advocate for our industry. I think, not getting too deep politically, but it is really interesting that one of the co-sponsors of the FIT Act is now the Senate Majority Leader for the upcoming term of Senate, which is a really great thing for our industry. We have a champion of fitness who is now in the highest position in the Senate, and we're hopeful that we can finally get some traction on FIT and get it passed through the Senate this year or next. And I'm really excited about that opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for raising that. And we would love to welcome everybody to Washington in May for that event. So thanks for the plug. I'm going to move over to you, Mr. Smith, so Chris Craytor and I have been on this journey, getting us to where we are today. And then he has put it in your very capable hands. But often being a board member, or especially a chair member, is sometimes a thankless role in many ways, because there's so much work that has to go on that is behind the scenes and not terribly sexy. So I just want to ask you, is what made you want to be the chairman of the association today?
Yeah, I appreciate you, having me here, and it's always good to see Chris Craytor. Anytime I can see a Chris that actually has hair on their head, and I have to view my bald head the whole time, it's just really impressive. That's why I carry hats around all the time. So I have my official HFA hat. I'm going to keep it off for the purpose of the podcast, but just wanted to mention how great his hair looks today, because it's just always jealous when I get a chance to see that. But back to the matter.
What about my hair?
Liz, your hair always looks lovely. I mean, come on.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
That's without question. But in terms of me wanting to, step into the chairman role, I think it was really just from what Chris kind of framed up in terms of the accomplishments that happened over his tenure as chairman. It was really to kind of continue that good work, right? And make sure that we didn't lose any of that momentum. And so certainly serving as vice chair and watching all the success that you were able to have with your team, and what, Chris was able to help accomplish with the NHFA and the PAC. And, he's a very humble guy, but I think his leadership was instrumental in also helping you, collaborate and get all the operators at the table that needed to be there, that wanted to have a voice and really make a difference from that perspective. And so, yeah, that's part of it. And then the second piece was, I think most people know my business is up in Canada. And so I do represent a bit of a different lens from an international perspective. And I do think there's opportunities for us to continue to win on the international stage as well, while still having a very strong advocacy domestic focus that is really advocating for our industry in a very meaningful way.
Yeah, and I'll just make a shameless plug there because of the international front. Chris, you and I were just in Barcelona for our European Congress, and I think we saw what a great event that is and what a great community of supporters we have internationally. And we're very soon going to be announcing our dates for the next Congress in Amsterdam. And so I really just appreciate you being with us, Chris Smith, on that journey.
Yeah, it was a cool event. It was fun. And, even when Chris is talking about the next fly-in, I think the significance of this fly-in, and Chris, I'm not going to repeat all the points he made, but I would say, this is the one we definitely want all the C-level executives to come out to, right? We need everyone to kind of really not just say, oh, I'm just going to send a team member or whatnot. We also need it to be representative of not just the big club groups, right? We need the medium club groups. We need the small group club groups. We have to remember that all of these elected officials, that at the end of the day, the people that are showing up at those fly-ins are constituents of those elected officials. And so them hearing from a broad, vast group of people that are representative of, business owners in their community and or leaders of businesses in their community is critically important across the spectrum, right? It's not just to say it's a one size fits all deal. So love to see that event, continue to become a bigger part of what we do, because I think that, again, the work you've been doing there, Liz, is tremendous. And it is kind of a slow, thankless job, right? Where it's like you don't always get credit for not even day to day or week to week, sometimes month to month or even year to year, right? Because there's just a lot of effort that's being put forth behind the scenes to kind of meaningfully move things forward. And we're, certainly, I think, as an association and as an industry, in the best place we've ever been as it relates to some of the big accomplishments that we all want to have. And so I'm certainly excited about, the kind of next 12 months in terms of what I think the HFA is going to accomplish, again.
Yeah. And thank you. And I think what I'll say to that, and you just touched on it, right, is about the leadership in Washington and members of Congress, and this goes back to a little bit about the fly-in too, is that one thing is that even though we're a relatively new industry, We're roughly, 40, 45 years old as an industry. We have presence everywhere. And that is something that is a major differentiator from us to so many other industries. So we have a gym, a club, a yoga studio. We have something in every congressional district across this country. And that is so tremendously powerful. And we have only begun to be able to figure out how to leverage that. So I just think as we look to the future, the strength of what that could bring is going to be tremendous. And speaking of the future, I think many people in your clubs and in your industries, you all have, the big, hairy, audacious goal, the BHAG, and Chris Smith as our chairman today. I think my question for you would be, what do you think is the BHAG for our association?
Yeah, great question. Appreciate it, Liz. I mean, I think, we had another board member who shared some perspective and it got a lot of interest recently in a recent board meeting around, previously from an international perspective, we, as an association, formerly IHRSA, now HFA, had talked about this idea of 230 million people globally, right? Which I think is certainly, it is kind of that BHAG, right? We can kind of measure that and that activity level from a country by country perspective. But then specific to the US, I think it's, can we, achieve 30% by 2030? And so can we get to the 230 million by 2030? And can we also get 30% participation in fitness clubs by 2030? And so that would be an incremental change. And again, it varies a little bit by state. It could be as much as 5%, 7%, depends on exactly where you're located within the US. But that accumulative growth of the industry, right? From what would that mean if we had that much more participation? That would be a tremendous windfall of opportunities. It means anyone that wanted to grow their business in the US would be growing their business if that was the case, right? Which again, I think that's really, I think what the association is looking to help all of the, its representative members achieve, right? Is growth and success, and then provide them the protection in place to operate their business in a meaningful way, where, they feel like, it's fair and pragmatic and impartial, and it's equitable across, our industry versus say others. I think that's what our industry's always been looking for, right? Is to kind of, be treated on the level of other, trillion-dollar businesses. Because if you look at the health and wellness space, I just read a recent report where, the wellness space and the personal wellness space is now bigger than the pharmaceutical industry. And I think that's something that people need to understand and understand the relevancy of the work that we do and the difference that we make in people's lives. And again, back to elected officials, their constituents, all the people in their communities, how they interact and use wellness and health and fitness in their daily lives.
Yeah, I love that. And we will be coming out with a very robust campaign around this 30% by 2030. It's a great goal. It lines up with what we're calling almost a mega decade of sport right now, between what we have on the horizon with the Olympics and so much action going on, that we have a great opportunity to be a really relevant part of all of those conversations, which is super cool and super fun. But it does ultimately always come back to advocacy. And Craytor, I know, again, we talked a little bit about this already, but how do you think that the advocacy landscape has changed, either while you were our chair or where we sort of sit today and what the future looks like?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I would just say that, not being involved directly, meaning at the trade association level, and simply being somebody who supported the advocacy efforts of the association and would go to the odd fundraiser periodically and those types of things. I think to where I am now, there's been a big learning curve. And I think a few relevant points there is, one, Congress, at least in the US, continues to pass fewer and fewer bills at a national level. And if we look at what's happened during COVID and even afterwards, so many of the wins and losses happen locally, whether it be at your town level, your city level, your state level, your province level. You're going to have a lot of rules and restrictions there. And so what I would say is that waiting for the trade association to do all the advocacy for you isn't necessarily a great strategy, as good as we can be, because there's a million places that are making rules all the time. And you as a business and operator need to be aware of what's happening and then get involved. And get involved could be simply showing up to meetings. Getting involved could be writing checks to candidates you support who are aligned with your vision and values. So I do believe that, understanding the local nature of advocacy was something I learned, and I think it's actually even more important now. is that it's very, very difficult to get anything passed. It's much easier to stop something harmful. And so I would suggest that everyone really take a kind of at least a 5-minute break, a 10-minute break, a 1 hour a month, just to see what the heck's going on in your local law environment, legal environment, rules environment, to make sure that there's nothing coming down from either elected or appointed leaders that's going to impact your business. So I really believe in that. And then the last thing I'll say is I think that in the time on the board, we've created a more robust advocacy engine, a better funded advocacy engine at the trade association level. And my dream when I came on the board was to make sure that we had adequate coverage in every state house across the country here in the U.S. And we're getting closer to that. We did have pretty good coverage pre-COVID. It did go to zero, and so we've had to build that back up. But I love the idea that in state houses around the country, especially those that turn into bellwethers like your Californias, New Yorks, and Floridas, and so forth, that we're adequately represented to make sure that our voice is heard. I think Chris is right. Like we're much bigger than we get credit for. And I think that it really takes all of you and all of us as operators to really get involved in order for us to punch at an appropriate weight, given the strength and size of our industry.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chris. And what I'll just say about monitoring everything that is going on at the state level is right now we're already monitoring over 1,000 pieces of harmful legislation around the country. We've had very great wins on that, and there's more to come. And it's about, having eyes and ears on the ground. And so our relationship really needs to be a partnership also. So this is my plug to say that if you are facing a threat, be it local, state, or beyond, please make sure we know so that we can come in and help fight. And that's where we've had a lot of tremendous wins on the issues that matter to all of you. Everything from liability coverage to a click to cancel policy. So, but there are things that pass in the middle of the night, and you as the business operators in the state need to let us know so that we can make sure that we can be there to fight it together. So let me go back to you, Mr. Smith, because we've talked a lot about advocacy and on the U.S. front, but also you with your Canadian international lens. I'd be curious on your thoughts about how you think we can be a more representative body for the global and fitness and wellness state around the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, when we look at, apologies there, I'm clearing my throat. I think when we look at Canada specifically, like I participate with FIC, Fitness Industry Canada. And so, that's who I count on to kind of do my local representation and protect me within, Canada. That being said, some of the work that does get done in the US can carry over and transfer over. And so I look at that almost as the arms of the association, right? When we think about the research and the education piece, right? Like a lot of this stuff is transferable and is what can you learn? I mean, even back to Spain. I mean, there's some countries that we're talking about, can we get the FIT Act passed? Canada, we have a different thing where we're asking for a tax line to be read differently or interpreted differently than how it's interpreted now. But like in some Nordic countries, like, Sweden and Finland, they already have all this in place. So there's even opportunities when you think about the globalization of it to say there's countries around the world that are already winning. And so how did they get that done? How did they partner with elected officials and or health ministers in various countries to have those wins and have those, successes? And so, I think there's definitely a global approach to what we do. Certainly the association has a very domestic advocacy focus. However, again, that work that is being done, I do think can be transferred over and or again, global learnings. And that's really what it's about. And that's why it is, an international and global association, because we are collectively working with people around the world to put the best foot forward for our industry, at all times.
So in closing here a little bit, and again, we've talked a lot about advocacy, and I'd love for you, if you think that we've missed anything generally on the advocacy, either domestic or international front, for either of you to add some context there. And if not, then I have maybe two other questions to ask you both before we go to that. I think what I'd love to just ask you both is, obviously you're on the front lines of the industry as business operators. You're seeing things much differently than what I am seeing in Washington, D.C. every day. And I would love you both to sort of speak of, as business operators, what are the issues that keep you up at night? What are the things that you're spending your time and your energy on, and maybe where we can partner as an association or maybe not? But I think so many people in this universe are finding challenges every day, sometimes every hour, depending on, your club. And I would just love your takes on what are the things that keep you up at night. And I'll start with you, Craytor.
Got it. Okay. Well, look, I mean, if you want to talk about challenges of business owners, I think there's a lot of what I call universal challenges that I think almost all club owner operators face who are in a retail physical location. Staffing issues and continuing always to find great talent. It's always an issue. Construction costs and finding ways to create your spaces more cheaply and renovate them and keep them looking good more cheaply remains a challenge. The interest rate markets, are higher than they were. And so then getting bank financing or other forms of financing continues to be expensive. And so you end up with this really interesting challenge is that, the pricing power you may have as a business may or may not exceed the cost increases that are going to be borne by the overall economic conditions, whether it be increased in labor cost or whether it be increased in occupancy cost or borrowing costs, you name it. And so the challenge is, how do we as club operators, business owners, continue to offer a product, right, and service and operating model that allows us to kind of stay ahead of that curve and continue generating positive cash flow so you can grow the business and pay your people and give raises and all the things that are fun about the industry, right? So I do think the economic piece of it always worries me, just because I can't control it. I think we get to, we're all, I think we have an industry of really, really scrappy entrepreneurs who always find solutions to things and are very creative. But you can only control a certain amount of your landscape. So much of it is actually happening outside of. And if I want to shift briefly to the challenges for the industry, I think one of the challenges is also one of our strengths, is that we as an industry are very fragmented and spread out all over the place. But that means that we lack some of the heft of, say, a pharmaceutical industry where you have some very, very large players with outsized influence. And so because of our distributed nature, and really, pretty widespread ownership, what I would call kind of spectrum, you're not necessarily going to have that level of push, and you get a lot of different opinions. Liz, I know that everybody who calls you they may be similar, but pretty much none of them think the same. And a lot of them have their own ideas. As members, as operators, as owners, God knows Chris and I probably think differently about a lot of stuff. Even though there's plenty of similarity. So what I would just say is that also worries me, because how do we in the future really, I think, create an opportunity where we're at the dinner and not on the menu, so to speak, for our industry, in spite of the nature of it, which is to be a pretty fragmented operation. So anyway, those are my worries.
Well, you sleep well because you exercise every day, and so you live a well-balanced life. Exactly.
That's correct.
Okay. What about you, Chris Smith?
Yeah, I mean, somewhat similar. I mean, I think, again, when you look at like the segmentation within our industry and the space, right? So we've got different operators on different levels and spectrums and scale. So we got boutique operators and HVLP operators, active lifestyle, and the mainstream, what's kind of all traditional, fitness centers that have been around, and gyms and clubs, however you want to frame it or think about it. So you have that. Then you have the scale. They have 2 clubs, 5 clubs, 200 clubs or more, like, just depends on what the number is, right? And so again, what keeps me up at night is not that there's diversification amongst our industry. It's more about, truthfully, that back to the scrappy nature of it, is that when we are scraping, scratching, clawing, and fighting to kind of be relevant and make sure that we're getting what we need, in the event that there is another quote unquote emergency, aka what took place during the pandemic, that we're adequately represented, is that it's the bad actors that keep me up at night, right? It's the people that don't comply and they don't want to basically deal with things in a fair, equitable manner, or they want to, sue the government versus saying, hey, look, can we come alongside you and provide you some education and some support and help you understand what we're doing versus always making it a litigious issue? Because we saw that in some states during the pandemic, and frankly, it was harmful, right? And it's even harmful to our association in terms of getting certain people to the table, right? So even for me sitting in the board chair position now, and I'm talking to other CEOs and I'm saying, hey, we need you at the table. And they're like, well, this is what I need. I talk about like, look, do you invest your money? Do you put it in like the market? And they're like, well, yeah, of course you do, right? Like they're saving and they're investing. But if you're not saving and investing into the association and somehow you expect this big return at the end, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't compute. And so it's the bad actors a little bit. And it's also a lot of the really great players that maybe aren't at the table yet. That what keeps me up at night, maybe as chairman, right? I wouldn't say keeps me up as an operator, which is maybe the question you asked. From an operations perspective, yeah, I think it's all the stuff Chris talked about, right? It's just the cost of capital right now. When you look at just the real estate and the markets, when I look at what may or may not take place with tariffs, the fact that my business is in Canada, my cost of construction is going to go up, right? Because I know that from the last time that they were, this individual was in office, that what my cost of construction was based on tariffs and the impact on Canada. So I'm hopeful that doesn't happen again. Hopefully the US and Canadian government will take a different approach, but they might not. And so that's something that's not going to keep me up at night, but it's a real problem and something that, I'll have to deal with as that comes about. And again, just the minimum wages here in Canada versus just like in a lot of places in the US are scaling to a place that they're out of control. And I think we've seen that. I look at that as harmful. I don't view our industry for our entry level positions as career positions. They were never intended to be career positions. So while I certainly appreciate and agree for certain industries and businesses the concept of a living wage, the folks that are working in that, it just makes it prohibitive for me from an overall staffing and labor model. And so there's some real challenges there. And so I hope that governments are learning and listening to, again, their constituents and seeing that, because we've seen a lot of the negativity out of places like, say, California with what they did with the fast food industry. They're not spending more on labor. They just had to do a bunch of job cuts. They're investing more in technology and they're eliminating jobs. And so it's harmful at the end of the day. And so that's my opinion, obviously. But those are the things I think about. And again, to Chris's point, nothing necessarily keeps me up at night, but I'm certainly mindful and thinking about how do we keep advancing and making things better for all.
Very well said. And I love all of your answers, obviously, from the policy perspective, but right, fragmentation, bad actors, those are real things that we need to be honest about and think about. So in closing here, I would love to ask you all kind of a final question. And that is, if you had one ask of this industry through this podcast to say, here's what I want you to do, what would that be? And I want to start again with you, Craytor, and then I'm going to end with you, Mr. Smith.
So what would I want you to do, as in Liz Clark, the CEO of?
No, I think you can tell me what you want me to do. That's completely fine. But also what you want our industry to do, what you would want the listeners and the viewers of this podcast to do.
Yeah, I think the opportunity for us to become relevant in the healthcare space, I think, has never been greater. And if you look at the trends in many countries, worse here in the US, but we're certainly not alone in this, is that people, are getting unhealthy or becoming unhealthier. Physical activity and eating better foods certainly are going to be antidotes to that. And I believe that we have a role to play there. And what it'll require is, from an industry perspective, is to actually, take yourself seriously as operators and owners with regard to our impact on health, not just creating a sales culture around making sure we've replaced everybody who left, right? And that we've, made our leads and, to convert enough leads this month and made our sales quotas and all the things that a lot of clubs have typically worried about as sales engines. But the question is, how are we helping people get results? Because out of this will come the opportunity to actually take a leadership role in improving the health and wellness of your local community, your environment, your state, your country, et cetera. And I think that we have everything at our backs in terms of the wind, and we have forever. And so, if I have a wish, and I will say it's a wish because I've been in the industry 20 years and it's been a wish the entire time, is that at some point that logjam breaks and allows us as an industry to be taken more seriously with regard to our impact on mental and physical health. I really think that this is out there for us if we can just grab it, but it'll require us to grow up a little bit as an industry and take ourselves seriously in this regard, not simply looking at ourselves as just as good as next month's sales and how we can actually get personal training from X number to Y number. It's okay, what kind of difference are you making in the lives of your members and your communities? And I'm hopeful that more clubs jump on that bandwagon because I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Very well said. Okay, what about you, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, it's really the same thing, right? I mean, I think that, I've known Mr. Craytor for a long time and interacted with a long time, but we just want everyone to participate in a meaningful way, like get to the table. And I can appreciate, past sentiments and, the history lessons that have been provided by many around the historical of, Chris talked about earlier, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I appreciate all that. And then, I just like to politely remind people it's 2024. Like we're in the now. Like let's live in the present and let's look forward to the future. And that's an incredible future if we continue to get more and more support, which we've been, galvanizing. And again, those are some of the wins that you have, Liz, right? Back to more and more operators of various sizes are coming to the table. And so I would just ask individuals to recognize what I would maybe describe as certainly not a ceremonial association, and certainly one that is very focused at the, advocating for our industry, again, on a global level. And again, the research and the education and everything we're doing to grow, promote, and protect is really meaningful. And if we want to put nitrous on it, or if you want to drive a V8 instead of a V4 hybrid or whatever, then that engine requires dollars, right? And the dollars come from everyone participating. And so it's really like, grab a drink and pull up to the bar here and let's have a chat and get involved, right? It's yes, get involved with your states and this and that if you're domestic, but get involved with the association. Like the no complaining rule, right? If you're going to complain about something, but you're not going to be part of the solution, then you're just a complainer. You're just a whiner. So if you want to do something about it, then it's open arms. Like we'll take it. People want to call and cuss me out and say, you guys aren't doing this. Great. Let me know. You and I, Liz, will figure out, can we address that? Hopefully we can, and then we can move forward. But we just want more people involved.
Amen, brothers. Oh, great.
Hey, trade show. Prices go up November 30th. Get involved by starting there and getting your tickets and going. Some more shameless plugs for you, Liz. We just got to get, it's going to be awesome. First time in Vegas in a long time. It's going to be a pretty badass show. I'm really looking forward to it. So get your tickets now is what I would say. Start there.
Yes.
If you haven't started already.
Yes, thank you. And like I said, it's going to look different than it has in the past too, in a more interactive way, which is really fun. So listen, I can't thank both of you enough for everything that you have done for this industry, for all of the time that you have spent in it, for everything you've done for me personally, and for everything you've done for this association. I think that we continue to get stronger and stronger and stronger. And I'm excited about the future, and you've been just instrumental in making all of it happen. So this was really fun for me to see you both today and to see that we are on good footing and the future is here and it's now. And so thank you for doing this. Thank you to our entire sponsor community. I'm going to make a plug. Thank you so much to Matrix, who brought this podcast to life, and look forward to where we go from here. So thank you both.